It is the Palm Civet type from Medarot 5 that focuses on a mastery of quick flurries from both arms and then running out of the way before the opponent has a chance to react. It is PCV00 Gairain, with a kit of Sword, Double Claw, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of P-Loader, which buffs the success of equipped melee parts relative to the Metaforce charge in his gauge. Now, as an event reward, Gairain is honestly someone who was very easy to obtain, and honestly, who would say no to free parts, especially as with more conventional skills that he offers. Sword is a basic and conventional melee skill that really has no drawback or weakness, and despite it being a head part, it's always one you can never ever go wrong with using anywhere. Right and left arm of claws are also conventional melee skills that are also scattered AoEs, meaning it will damage one part normally and then two others at random at 1/3 of the damage. Now this alone makes Gairain a very solid conventional melee fighter on the field, with someone who has no major drawback or weakness when it comes to using him, and can cover for himself as a basic and conventional melee fighter moderately well without anyone really needing to support or buff him, since he is moderately balanced across the board in that. The biped legs do also grant him a very solid terrain coverage across all terrains, and the P-Loader ability actually does tie in very nicely with his ability, as the success rate, just as a reminder, is not just your likelihood of landing hits, but also your likelihood of landing critical hits, which means on a full or immediate or a decently sized charge, Gairain will not only have a hard time missing opponents, but it'll be honestly a blue moon if a hit actually isn't a critical hit on top of that, which means even something like a scattered AoE like Claw will be dealing a pretty fair amount of damage across the board when used correctly, even if it is somewhat inconsistent with its damage because the two random hit bonuses that it also gains. For these reasons, I do honestly have to rate Gairain a pretty solid 7 out of 10 across the board, and definitely one of the better event rewards we've had thus far up to this point. Even though his stats are moderately fragile to a point, not to saying that he's not necessarily overly tanky or say has super high speed, but the P-Loader ability actually does work very well in his favor as someone who really doesn't need all those extra or fancy bonuses to really make every hit count, as if left to his own devices is someone you can kind of rely on as your basic and balanced fighter across the board. Especially given that if Claw isn't something you can use, basic Sword you can generally never ever go wrong with either. As mixed parts score, I do honestly have to rate Gairain about an equal 7 out of 10, and in some cases, I might even consider arguing a 7.5 in some cases, given that Sword, generally, like I mentioned, you can never ever go wrong with using, and even if maybe Claw is something you may not use very often, if at all, pairing it with the P-Loader ability or even something similar to that will grant Gairain a much better bonus and likelihood of making every hit count, even if it is a scattered AoE that will do very well, as intended, scattered damage, and even a likelihood of maybe landing a critical hit every once in a while to further bolster his viability on the field.